time again, that time when we swing wide the doors to our favorite virtual saloon like the gunslingers of old. Except, of course, that we're all over middle-aged dads. Slide into our favorite booth to have a conversation with whoever we happen to meet there. And today I'm joined by just Ken.
Just me.
Just Ken.
That's all I am.
That's all
Just
he is.
Ken.
Just Ken. And I'm your host, Chris, and this is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar. What happened to Greg today, Ken?
Well,
It's very disappointing.
he's serving his wife today.
Yeah, I guess you got to do that from time to time, don't you?
Go figure.
Well, we are privileged anyways today, even though Greg's not around for some reason. He just seems to be off an awful lot these days. Like,
He does.
I told him that he should enjoy a little bit of retirement, and he, took that seriously or something. Like, now he just, wants to be gone all the time.
I think we're going to have to give him a D for attendance.
We're gonna have to rein that in. Maybe he might have to come out of retirement because he's just taking it too far now. It's getting a little ridiculous. How dare he not work full time at over 70 years old? What in the world's wrong with him?
And you and he probably
Who does he think he
know
is?
each other probably better than us.
Who, you and Greg?
Yeah, Greg would have enjoyed this
Yeah,
episode.
yeah, he would have.
He
Yeah,
would've. Love you,
Yeah.
Greg.
yeah. We kind of like you.
We'll keep him.
We'll keep you around. But today we are privileged to be joined by Dan Wilson, who is going to be running for Kootenai County Sheriff in the 2024 primary election. So, Dan, thanks for being with us. Thanks for being here.
Pastor, it's great to see you. Thanks for having me on today.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. So you're seeking to unseat Bob Norris, who was elected in 2022. Pretty well liked in the community. I mean, before we get into all that, because this is going to be an interesting conversation, I think, for people in our community. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Dan Wilson?
Dan Wilson.
Who is this guy?
That is a deep question. I'm going to try to be brief. I'm a native of Spokane, fourth generation on the original Antone plant homestead.
Wait a minute, Antone plant?
Antone plant? I thought you'd like that.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. First settler to the Spokane Valley. It's a trapper. Ran a ferry across Spokane River, and his house, which later became part of my grandparents' barn, was the original way house, and that's where Field Governor Stevens, Chief Gary, Mullen, all the greats would converge up there as they were, planning for the railroad. So,
Wow.
a lot of history.
I need to look into that.
Yeah.
Antone
There's
plantation.
a connection
plant.
there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, my last name is Antone.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I thought you'd like that.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I wasn't aware of that. They were first settlers in Spokane.
He was the first white man in the Spokane Valley.
I'll
He was
be
a trapper.
darned.
This is, pre-Civil War. We're talking, I believe, 1840s.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
I definitely got to look into that. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So your family got tied into that somehow.
Well, we weren't related to plant, but my great-grandfather, Fred, purchased the homestead back in the early 20s or early 30s. I forget how far back, but 30s at least. And I was the last of the Wilsons to live on that piece of property in the Spokane Valley, and made my exodus to Idaho, which I had been planning for many years, and was really fortunate to be able to move in 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020.
Yeah.
I was actually planning on selling my residence prior to the shutdowns. And as we were getting the house ready for the market, then, of course, the lockdowns came down. And we thought, well, this is going to be interesting. As the months progressed, we just said, we've got to make this move. And here we are in the greatest state in the union and the greatest county in the country.
Yeah.
Amen.
I would not disagree with that. I mean, we surely are in God's country up here.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the move was planned before the pandemic hit.
It was. It was 10 years in the making, really. It just took me that long to be able to sort affairs out and get over here.
It's amazing that it actually went through during the pandemic, though.
God's providence.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were to tell you how it all lined up, it's absolute God's providence.
Oh,
but,
do tell.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes from just even looking at being able to find a piece of property in Kootenai County.
Yeah.
As you know, finding property is like looking for the lost ark.
Yeah.
And we had looked at all over the county, all over Kootenai County, from the south to the far north and to the far east, all around, and just could not find anything. And then one day, this piece of property came available. I think at like 11 o'clock in the morning. There was a track of 4, and my wife and I were up there by 2 and had made the offer, and it was just like hotcakes. Everybody was purchasing it, but lots of God's providence throughout everything, including making a rapid sale of our other house, and so I always can see the hand of God and how He has provided for me and my family over my entire life, ever since I was a young man.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's always cool to hear how God moves people, and there's a lot of people getting moved up to this area.
Yeah,
key people too, not just like population, but kind of key people that it seems like God's really trying to do something up in this area.
I absolutely agree with that. I've believed this for many years, for well over 10 years, as you've seen the balkanization happen across the country. And how is it that so many of like-minded people with the same values have converged at this great spot? And look at all the natural resources we have here. We have just an amazing piece of land that is unlike just about anything that I've ever seen.
Yeah. It's remarkable. That's for sure. So, tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, my immediate family. I have 5 children, and 3 of them are already out of the house. I have 2 left. I have a special needs daughter who lives with me. She's 18, and my youngest daughter is 15, almost 16. And my other 3, again, I have one in the Navy, and she's a corpsman. And then I have 2 sons that are over in Spokane. And then I have 3 stepchildren as well, and they're all out of the house. One's a commercial airline pilot, one's a trucker, and the other one's working at Krispy Kreme. So we have a lot of kids.
So at one time, you guys had 8 kids in the house?
Never. No, we married after our kids had grown up. Donna and I have been married for 3.5 years. So
so you guys dodged the bullet of having 8 children in the house.
Yeah,
all
8
at one
is
time.
enough, right?
That's what I was
enough.
just thinking. Like I was getting the whole theme music and everything going in my head. So you guys dodged that bullet, but you guys had a lot of kids in the house at one time, though, right?
I did when I, with my original 5, and it was a lot of kids in a small confined space. They were all homeschooled too.
Yeah,
and I was homeschooled. Actually, I was the first generation homeschooler. My parents pulled me out of Christian school in 1984 when homeschooling was just barely legal in Washington State. And you want to talk about being like in the unpopular club. I tried being a homeschooler in 1984 in Washington, but I continued homeschool all the way through and graduated high school. And but with my children, my 5, they were all homeschooled, and one's still continuing. So
yeah. Would you ever go back and do it differently?
For me or for my children?
For your children?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I do not ascribe to allowing the state to indoctrinate my children in Marxism and in a worldview that is anti-Christian.
Yeah, that was one of the things that with our family as well, we made a decision early on to homeschool our kids and make whatever sacrifices we need to make to homeschool them, because just even at that time, just looking at it from a pragmatic viewpoint, the public school system was an absolute failure. And, my wife and I, we looked at each other and we're like, well, I mean, we could do better than these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, just academically, we can do better than them.
Yes.
So that was one of the driving factors. But then you start looking into it and it's like, wow, yeah, it's inundated with secular humanism and postmodernism and, tinges of Marxism, especially when they were really pushing CRT. And,
right.
I don't even know if that's a thing anymore.
Well, they've just rebranded it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what was that? We did a whole thing on that at one time with the crossover between the critical race theory and the, what did they call it now? Yeah. Not ESG. The, the learning
social
thing. Social emotional learning. Yeah. That's what I was looking for. That's the word I was looking for.
Too many acronyms.
It's how do you keep track of all of it these days?
What do you do when you share acronyms with multiple different labels?
Yeah.
Then you want to get really messed up.
Yeah. It gets ridiculous. Come on, people. Can we simplify life a little bit? So tell us a little bit about. So you've got 5 children, 3 stepchildren. You're currently married to Donna, right?
I am the lovely Donna. I know she hates when I say lovely.
Why is that?
My beautiful, a cliche, I think.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But Donna and I,
you guys can't
love of my
see
life.
her nodding her head fiercely, and then
rolling
eye
the
rolling.
eyes.
She is truly the best part of me.
Yeah.
You talk about being joined with somebody that the Lord puts in your life to be that anchor, and Donna is that to me. And I just she's it.
Yeah.
She is it. Everything else. Well, my children, but everything else can go goodbye, and as long as I have Donna, I'm good.
Yeah. It's amazing how a good woman in our lives can make us completely better people.
True. Absolutely
All the
true.
way around. Yeah.
If you listen to any of Dan and Donna's podcast, you'll quickly learn that Donna's a firecracker.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
She keeps me on my toes.
Mm-hmm.
But she's way smarter and more articulate than I am.
So are you saying you're at a disadvantage?
You always marry up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So in order to get an advantage, you'd probably have to just literally get into a wrestling match.
Well, possibly.
She might beat you there too, huh?
Good chance. Or she'd pull a gun.
Well, I saw that you're a jiu-jitsu white belt.
I'm just a white belt, yeah.
What is she?
No belt.
No belt?
No belt.
Beyond.
She's a
She
street
doesn't-
fighter.
She doesn't believe in violence.
Oh, okay.
And then if she does, she fights dirty probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
With her words.
People who fight dirty win. That's the way that works.
Street Fight 101.
Yeah. Jiu-jitsu, huh? When did you start that?
I started jiu-jitsu in January of 22.
Yeah.
And I had heard about jiu-jitsu for, 10, 15 years. And of course, it is now widely popular. Everybody's doing it. When I was a kid, it really wasn't a thing. There weren't a lot of studios around or gyms or training academies. And I really had wanted to get into jiu-jitsu years earlier, but the pandemic, the scam-demic,
Yeah.
put a stop to a lot of those. So I primarily, not only did I want to for myself at the time, I was law enforcement and I just wanted more tools in the tool belt. I like the challenge, but also my children. I wanted my daughter Adeline, who excels. She lives and breathes jiu-jitsu, and but I wanted her to be able to experience it because I think jiu-jitsu is. I've done all sorts of striking sports, but for me, jiu-jitsu is probably the greatest martial art you can be involved in, because what it does is it causes you to have to really strategize and be calm in constricted states and to think through it. And you can't use your power. You can't use your physical power most times in order to get out of whatever submission that you're in.
Yeah, it's flexibility and leverage.
Yeah.
It's pretty much standard issue in MMA now.
Yes.
You either have to have jiu-jitsu or some type of Greco-Roman wrestling type background to even make it anywhere, because it always goes to the ground. 100% of the time, it always goes to the ground.
It does.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, we have another. Well, Richard, you know Richard.
I know Richard.
Yeah, he's involved in jiu-jitsu pretty heavily.
And I'm certain that if I were on the mat with him right now, like everything else that he does, he would dominate me there as well. He's a firebrand.
He's never won a competition, right?
Well, winning a competition and actually still being able to submit somebody is two separate things.
Well, I guess so. I guess if you're gonna be that diligent about trying to give Richard props, I guess we'll go that way. Yeah. No, he's pretty dedicated to it. I've entertained thoughts of it. It's good to know for sure. It's something that people should definitely look into. You should definitely know how to take care of yourself. That's for sure. So what was your career previous to where you're at now, and what are you doing now? What's going on?
I'll give a brief on that.
Pull that up a little bit to kind of get it close to your
Came
mouth.
out of high school, and I went into a carpentry apprenticeship, and that was a 4-year apprenticeship. So I worked construction right out of high school, had a couple small businesses when I was, in grade school, and always liked business type of endeavors. And then by the time I was in my early 20s, I'd started my own company, Rock and DW Construction. That became a commercial general contractor. We did some residential, but we specialized in commercial tenant improvements, and also started a commercial cabinet shop. So I was well embedded into the life of construction into my 30s. And then as the companies were successful, I had great people that were helping run the show. And I said to myself that I really wanted to go back and be involved with law enforcement. It was something that I actually desired as a young kid, but right out of high school, you're way too young to be able to apply and get accepted to an academy, because you have to be about 20 or 21. And so at 35 years old, I applied to the Spokane Police Department's Reserve Academy. Went through the process, the physical agility test, the extensive background, the oral boards, the polygraphs, the psychs, and then earned a opportunity to go through the Reserve Academy, which the Reserve Academy is the same as the full-time academy, but it's condensed in several weeks. It's greatly condensed. So rather than your full-time job is to go to the academy for 4, 5, 6 months, we're still working full-time and going to academy at night and on weekends. And so when you graduate out of the academy, you take the exact same test that a full-time sworn officer does. And once you pass that and all the other requirements, then you're given a probationary status for the department that you work with. So anyway, I became a reserve police officer for the city of Spokane in 2011 and was with them for 4 years. And after that, I was recruited to go out to Liberty Lake and work for Chief Asmus out there. And I spent my last 8 years before retiring in March of this year as a singles car status patrolman.
Boy, you're talking about a difference in demographics.
It was, yeah. You went from, a single night in Spokane, we might have a foot pursuit, vehicle pursuit, stabbing, assaults, all the garden variety of the big city calls. And then going out to Liberty Lake, those calls were, far and few between, but we had a chance to do a lot more community policing where we got to interact with the community and get to know people. And, it doesn't matter if you're in a big city or small city. If you're doing the job, if you're being a peacekeeper, it all has the same fundamentals. People are people. And that's what I loved those calls.
Right.
So anyway, at about the same time doing all of that, prior to being accepted into the police academy, I had an opportunity to go down to California in Stockton and train with a company to become a certified executive protection agent. And over the years, did executive protection for Fortune 500 execs in Mexico. So
yeah, that's a massive growing industry right there too.
It is, and it was a high risk environment where we were at. We were unarmed, so there was a lot of pre planning, and I love this culture of protection and law enforcement, and I was very fortunate to be at a place in my companies where the companies don't run me, and I'm able to go out and give back to my community, thousands of hours, and to be able to provide and serve and protect, and
yeah.
So I really enjoyed that. And today I'm still a commercial general contractor. We've moved our businesses from Spokane to Post Falls. And so the commercial cabinet shop and the construction company are out there now.
Would you say that there's something built into your personality type that compels you to be in those types of jobs as opposed to like construction or something like that?
Yeah. From a very early age, I knew that I was a protector. And I think most men and women that enter into any kind of law enforcement or security have a desire. It's innate. God builds us into us who we are. He provides people, just like, the differences of pastors and teachers and, we all have these gifts that God gives to us, and it's innate in who we are. But I think that doesn't just define you. Just being a protector doesn't define you, because I could simultaneously be very successful because of the opportunities that God has given me to run these construction companies. And then at the same time, after negotiating contracts and completing the mission of constructing people's projects and doing them to the utmost of our ability, I can simultaneously then get into a patrol car and perform those duties. And so really it's I think each one of us has gifts that the Lord gives to us, and we just have to capitalize on them.
Mm-hmm. I'm always fascinated with personality types and law enforcement, and it's always interesting to me to find guys that they have some type of a drive to be involved with that, but it seems to be misplaced in that perhaps their motivations are wrong, or there's something about what they desire within themselves that is beyond like protection or selflessness. It kind of enters into kind of like an ego kind of thing.
Sure.
When do you, I mean, have you seen that a lot? And what personality types do you think like drive? What am I trying to ask here?
Are you kind of drawing a line between the sheepdog and the wolf?
Well, I mean, perhaps, but I think there's also people who want to be a sheepdog, but they're actually more along the lines of like I don't know, like a Chihuahua maybe.
Sure.
You know, they are very aggressive and they bark a lot, but in reality, they're really just trying to compensate for themselves.
Yeah.
Have you seen that a lot in law enforcement?
I don't know that I see any more of that in law enforcement than I do any other,
For sure.
you
Yeah.
know,
That's a good answer.
work in life. It's the condition of man.
Right.
And, I've said this many times. Law enforcement is a unique job because there are very evil people in our communities in this world. We know this. The darkness hates the light. And the delineator between a lot of this when it comes to law enforcement is, what is your personal worldview? What is your code? What is your belief? So if your belief is in one of a biblical worldview where Christ is center, then you take all of those typical roadblocks to being a good individual, and you're refined through the process, and you're serving and doing the work of the Lord. Whereas if you don't have that guiding light, then you're going to eventually succumb to the flesh.
Right.
So when you have these evil men and women in the world, it takes extremely meat-eating men and women to go and hunt them down. And I think a lot about back in the Old Testament, David's mighty men. How many of those men do you think were like the choir boy? Right? They were probably all meat eaters. And those meat eaters oftentimes have a personality that is not really conducive to interacting with the public, right?
Right.
And I'm talking about a small fraction, not even psychopath level, but there's a small section of guys that maybe have a little bit of that bark, but their bite is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And they maybe are not eloquent. They're a bull in a china shop. You don't want them talking to the media. They're braggadocious. They're arrogant, but they're really good at hunting evil. The well-rounded man, the warrior poet, is somebody that can talk well to the people that he serves, understands the mission, understands the authority that he is given, understands that his mission is bigger than just the ego at the moment. We're here as peacekeepers in order to facilitate a positive outcome and ultimately to make certain that justice is served.
That guy is extremely rare, though, Dan. The warrior poet.
He always has been.
Yeah. And do you feel like that's kind of what you strive towards? Because you're well read, you're a thinker. You are a bit of a philosopher. So do you think that that's something that maybe you like strive towards, as the kind of warrior poet archetype, perhaps?
I think I'm always looking to gain more wisdom and the character that I need to be what God has intended me to be.
Right.
The crucible for silver, the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the hearts of man. And we know that God's eyes wander to and fro over the earth looking for a righteous man. And that really, I can't speak on anybody else's behalf but my own, and I just know that I think there are a lot more men that are like me, but you just don't hear about them because
Right.
they're quietly doing the work. So, but we are living in a postmodern culture, and we know that we are seeing less and less of a realization and a belief in God. And once that happens, the worldview follows it. So instead of people that are working because of a Christian worldview, love your neighbor better than yourself, you are going to gravitate towards those that don't know what the truth is. They make their own truth. And somehow they crinkle up all the rules of law enforcement and the procedures, patrol procedures, and what the laws say. But that's dangerous, right?
Yeah, it's probably I mean, I would say that it's probably something that has arisen from the rise of moral relativism.
Yes.
And particularly in our college culture.
Yes.
I would say that our college culture has really bred this kind of postmodern moral relativistic kind of attitude where it's like, if I have my own truth, and my truth is relative to the community that I live in. And then if you're not within that community and you're trying to enforce rules upon me, then that's violence against me. More or less, in a nutshell, I think that's kind of what law enforcement is dealing with.
Yes.
Do you think that that's kind of creeping into our community? I mean, I know that they probably deal with that in Spokane for sure, but do you think it's creeping into our community here in Kootenai County?
More specifically, I want to make certain I'm answering your question accurately.
Okay.
So break that down just a little bit better so I can answer it correctly.
So the idea that my truth is my truth relative to me and my community. So, like, say for instance, CRT would be an extension of that, or diversity, equity, inclusion would be an extension of that. LGBTQ movements and any kind of violence that is kind of spawned off of that. Which, by the way, there are components of that is a violent culture.
Sure, absolutely.
And so, I'm talking about that. Do you think that our law enforcement is looking at the possibility of dealing with that type of scenario in the future?
Well, yeah, I don't know how it cannot.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you have lost the message and your culture is heading towards a certain way, if you, again, are not guided by a bigger entity than yourself, giving you the absolutes of what is wrong and versus right, then yes, everybody's going to do what is right in their own eyes and what the culture allows to happen, right?
So how does a police department shift for that?
Leadership. Everything always breaks down to leadership. And it is, I know that's cliche, but it really is. It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to combat evil and untruth is with the truth. And it has to start all the way from the top and go all the way down through the command staff, down to the line troops. But people need to be exposed to the truth. And it's all around us. We have 200 plus years of great documents to go back to see what our founders originally had to say, and those greats that came after us, even quotes through the Civil War and World War I and World War II. We have a pathway for truth, but sometimes we're too lazy or too much of a coward to stand and make that stand, regardless of who is or is not going to be behind you.
Now, we're speaking primarily of truth as it relates to perhaps like constitutional concepts
Constitution, but the Constitution derived its basis off of what? Natural law and God's law, right? All people are created equal under God. And so the two are hand in hand. They can try to separate this all they want, but it's clear when you go back and look at the founders, did they all have the exact same beliefs? We know that they did not.
Right.
But they overwhelmingly did believe in a creator who endowed us with those rights, and that we were subject to a higher power, that we were to be, promoting those truths, those absolutes that don't change from, generations.
Right. So what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that the sheriff's department will face in, say, the next 5 years that is going to need some solid leadership to bring it into?
Wow, there's so much. number one, budgets. Budgets are something that have been cyclical since the beginning of law enforcement. There's never enough budgets. There's never enough manpower. So we can throw that aside because that's a constant, right?
Right.
But I'm looking at things such as we know the lawlessness that has now been exposed throughout the entire nation. We have federal agencies that are running out of control, unaccountable, and they are coming into our communities and they're asserting themselves and seizing power that they never were granted. They're doing things unlawfully, whether it's the FDA, the EPA, the FBI, the DOJ, right? We have seen an out of control federal government. And so I think one of the greatest threats that we're going to see is the usurpation of our sovereignty, which the founders set up for us long ago. You know, we're all equal. The separations of powers that Hamilton talked about in Federalist, I think it was 85. But when you have the federal government imposing its will upon you at a local level, it will definitely impact you. We don't want our community members being unlawfully seized and taken out to go face a court in Washington, D.C., right? It's not a jury of our peers. We don't want to see like the Sacketts. You know, the Supreme Court finally ruled on the Sacketts and their, you know, very costly battle up there in Priest.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's going to be a lot of federal problems. Here's another big one. Look at how many millions of people are flooding across our border. And you don't think that won't impact Kootenai County, you're naive.
Yeah.
Now, maybe right now they have not made it fully up here, but no one really knows. The Border Patrol came out at a local town hall with Sheriff Norris, and they basically concluded, we really don't know. And let's say 10...
Well, how could they?
It's impossible.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's plausible deniability. If the government comes in and says, well, we're not shipping anybody up, but they're using an NGO, we know that the NGOs can do a lot of damage. And looking at a proactive policy of saying, okay, we know that we can't enforce Border Patrol type, you know,
you have no
activities.
jurisdiction
Yes.
over the national borders. Yeah.
But what are we doing to talk with our state legislators and our county to say what loopholes or what other things can we do to stop what's going to be coming? We don't want a whole bunch of illegals coming into our community and stealing up all of our resources, whether it's medical, whether it's social services. And then let's just say out of 10 million, because we know this from the FBI's own stats, we have, let's pare it down to 1% of 10 million of bad actors that are not from Mexico. They're military-aged men. What do you think that they're doing here?
Yeah.
So we have to have a proactive plan on how we're going to be dealing with these potentials. I mean, when you do anything in business, you have to look down the road and project things on what risks are potentially coming your way. And then as a risk assessment, you look at the probability and what the outcome is if those events take place. You know, that's risk assessment 101. Now is the time to be dealing with this, not when it's upon us.
And when you say dealing with it, you're talking about creating policy or perhaps even
Action
law
plans
or something similar to that at the state level that will safeguard our counties.
And we cower too much, once again, thinking that the feds are the ultimate authority, and they are not.
Yeah.
And so we have to, from the state level, convince them, the legislature and the governor, this has to be acted upon. Don't cower to whatever lawsuits are going to come your way by the feds, because you know that that's going to happen. Do what's right for your people. And so that is yet another storm on the horizon that we are going to be facing. And human trafficking, to me, is another huge problem that it's not being addressed.
Yeah, that's a tough one. We've tried to get involved in the human trafficking thing a couple of different times with different organizations, and we've found that for a church to be involved in that in any way, shape, or form is really difficult, because it's either a massive multi-organizational kind of structure that you can't really get invested in, or it's something that's just ran very poorly, and actually even puts people at risk.
Sure.
And so, you know, we found that we had a really hard time getting involved with it. So, you know, how could you address that with law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
But then is there a way to mesh in with that with the community so that we have like a network, more or less to deal with that issue?
Yeah. Well, coming from national, crime stats, NIBRS, which is basically the FBI's database, every time as a law enforcement officer, I cleared a call that required a report. I had to put a code in for what type of crime. And that's how they track it across even Kootenai County. You can go and drill in to find out what are the stats of crime. And Kootenai County, I think we're up well over 15% in crime overall this year, between this year and last. But if you look at human trafficking, there was only one recording incident of human trafficking. And I'm saying that there's a problem. You can say, well, look, we only have one instance recorded, so therefore there's no human trafficking going on. But we know that that is not true. Mm-hmm. We're in a county of over 170,000 people, next door to a city in a county that's 540,000-ish, give or take. And you only have one human trafficking when we know it's right now a multi-billion. It's the second leading, I think, business in the world.
Yeah, that would seem. I haven't seen that statistic, but if that statistic is true, then that's obviously nonsense because
we're not looking for it.
There's organizations that exist in Spokane specifically to deal with human trafficking.
So we're not looking for it, and that's one of my contentions is that there is nothing that we can do greater than to protect the vulnerable and the innocent. In fact, that is biblical.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not diminishing murders and robberies and all your garden variety of bad things that we do in our own communities. But there is nothing more abominable than to violate a child or even vulnerable individuals that are being trafficked against their will.
Yeah.
So I'm
the amount of adult males and females that are being trafficked not only for sex slavery but for just slavery, just labor.
And then along with human trafficking comes drugs, right? You have all sorts of other criminal activity that associates itself with the human trafficking. And there are good organizations that come in and work with local government, but here's what happens. Oftentimes, and I am not, just as a disclosure, making this claim here. This is a general statement. Oftentimes, the inability to go and hunt for human trafficking is because they're worried who they're going to catch in the net.
Wow. That's a terrifying thought.
Look at Epstein.
Yeah.
Why are they not releasing the Black Book? Why has that been swept under the rug? So I'm not going to digress on a whole bunch of that, but I see many of these things are not isolated in and of themselves. The sheriff's office has to deal, his number one duty is to secure the county and to enforce law. You have all these other things that you're doing. You have to do them well, the daily services, but you also have to be looking for all sorts of other evil in your community. And we have great resources that we have been given. The sheriff can use anybody that he needs to in order to help secure the county. That's Idaho state law.
Right.
So anyway, those are some of the bigger things that I am seeing, and really just to keep going on and saying, well, we'll deal with it when it shows up is too late. Policies have to be set. There has to be standards. I'm never calling for going to war with anybody, no violence, but we can have conversations where, as the sheriff, you walk into your local Fed offices and you say, here's how we're going to conduct ourselves, and this is not going to be tolerated because it is my job to stand between the people and an out of control, unaccountable government. And I'm not going to say that every action that comes this way is illegal. There are legitimate law enforcement activities that are taking place, but sending a SWAT team to a family's home at 10 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning because a kid makes a post that they find offensive and they're worried about it. There's so much more low-key ways to deal with that. We're not talking about high-risk situations that require full kit out. And we're seeing too much of the weaponization of the DOJ against parents that dare speak out against the education that their children are dealing with. the Catholics. We know that the FBI has targeted Catholics. We're Protestant, but Catholics, we had to protect their rights as well. And ultimately, we must be a country of a rule of law where everyone is equal, has equal protection under the law, period. And really, my goal is to have the conversations and then to stick to it and have consequences should those things get violated.
Yeah, to protect the individual's
Yes.
constitutional rights
Yes.
because they are a sovereign citizen of the United States of America.
So I will tell you that I don't care what your belief is. I don't care what your creed, what your background. None of that matters.
Mhm.
You can hear people come up and say, well, I'm such and such, and they're self-identifying, and therefore you're not taking care of me, and we're not being protected. Well, really? Because under equal protection under the law, if a crime has been committed against you, we are bound by our duty to give you justice.
Right.
So anyway, that's kind of, I guess, probably a longer answer than what you wanted.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, because these are the things I'm not sure that people really think about, what the law enforcement needs are in our community. And I think that there's probably a misconception in our community that because we are Kootenai County and, we're next to Bonner County and, we're way up here, we're kind of like, we're kind of sheltered from all of that, but I don't think that we're as sheltered as we think that we are.
No, we are not.
And, I think that people need to really think about, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
We've talked to several of our state representatives here, and to a person, most of them will tell you if you're a person that is politically minded, you should really focus on your state's sovereignty because Washington, D.C., it's doomed. It's like to turn that ship around is just a ridiculous notion. And so, focus on your state sovereignty, focus on putting elected officials in that are going to defend your freedoms.
Yes.
And that's one of the most important people in that is the elected sheriff of a county.
Because he is the chief law enforcement officer in the county, elected by the people.
The people.
He is accountable to the people and the people only. And under Idaho state law, the only person that can arrest a sheriff, do you know who it is?
No.
The coroner.
Really?
Yes. And do you know what it
Fun
takes
fact.
in order to be a sheriff in the state of Idaho?
Mm-mm.
So this is an interesting conversation.
I have no idea.
3 things. 1, United States citizen. That's a good thing. Number 2, 21 years of age. That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
3, you must have lived in the county for at least 1 year.
Wow.
Now it's like, well,
That's not a heap.
right? And the idea is because the sheriff is supposed to be a representative, no different than your county commissioner, no different than your state legislators, your state senators. It is a representation for the people, and having law enforcement experience is also very critical. It's not required.
But it's not required.
It's not required.
Yeah.
But we have somehow allowed this idea. We're always complaining government doesn't change, right? Because politicians stay and stay and stay, and oftentimes even in the sheriff's office, what the idea is that you have to have somebody that has been career law enforcement who's always been on the taxpayer's payroll, and then it's just naturally that person, because they've gone through everything from a basic patrolman all the way up to SWAT specialty teams and command staff, that automatically means that they're the only person suitable to fill this role. And Idaho says otherwise.
Right.
If it was important for Idaho, and they've never changed this law, for somebody to be a career law enforcement officer to be able to fulfill that role, then they would change it. But obviously they know that it doesn't need to be changed because the people are more than capable of making the decision for themselves of who they want to represent them.
Yeah. They can make that decision for themselves. That's one of the things that I really do like about Idaho. So in talking about getting into that role, what do you think needs to change in Kootenai County? What are the things that need to change?
More specifically, what do you think?
Administratively. Is there anything that needs to change administratively?
I don't, right now, from what I'm privy to, don't believe that there needs to be any major shakeup of the sheriff's office. I think that the men and women, the line deputies doing the day in, day out work are outstanding individuals. I hear this in the community all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Great men and women. And this happened not just in the last 4 years. This has been historically the truth in our county.
Yeah.
And so I don't see anything that I would immediately come in and say, this has to change. Obviously, we have issues like with staffing
Mm-hmm.
and budgeting. Specifically, the jail seems to be sucking the majority of the budget, and it's way over projected budgets because of overtime, not enough manpower, and overcrowding of the jail. But, you know, the problem with staffing in general is they're facing very similar problems that we in the out in the public sector in business are facing, limited resources. So it sounds horrible that we don't have men and women that can fulfill these roles because the pool is so limited. You can hardly get men and women to actually apply and pass all the background in order just to get the opportunity to go to the academy. So,
and then if you do end up getting them through the academy and you all do all the effort to get them through their training and their training officers, if you get through all of that, then a year down the road, what I've experienced and just doing the chaplaincy work is that there's a lot of attrition, not just like because of the job, but because of pay. A lot of officers will go to Spokane because they can make a lot more money in Spokane than they can here doing the same job.
And that is something that we all face in every one of our industries, right? That's not an uncommon problem. But also remember that if you get to the point where you are getting individuals in your organization that are just solely about the dollar, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Look, we all need to be making a living, especially with inflation and the cost of living today that is way higher than it was 20 years ago. And I'm never going to say that we don't want our employees to be treated well. That is biblical, right? To take care of them and their families. They shouldn't have to be out there begging or going into debt in order to
muzzling
be able to take
the
care.
ox that treadeth the corn. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, you also have to have a culture, because men and women aren't always drawn just to the dollar.
Okay, well, that's a hard sell. So how do you begin to create a culture where your job is a calling as opposed to a job?
Reminding people of why you started in the first place, what your overall calling is, why you are putting on the vest every day, putting on the shield. I like shield over badge. And why you suit up to go out and fight evil, why you're doing that for a calling. And then having the support all the way from the command staff down of ensuring that everybody is receiving communication up and down the chain of command. I mean, it's the extreme ownership principle, which is everybody becomes a leader in their own sphere. You equip your people with enough knowledge and authority and training so that they can make those decisions that they need. And when people have ownership in their jobs and positions, whether it's in the jail, whether it's on patrol, whether it's Marine Patrol, whether it's dispatch, when you have an ability to be a leader and make decisions because you're not being micromanaged. I'm not saying that anybody's being micromanaged, just so we're clear. I'm talking in general. Then you start building a culture where people are there to help each other, because everything comes back down to relationship. And if you have any agency or any business where people don't have relationship, you have nothing.
Yeah.
It's just people competing for their status up the ladder. And that is a problem when you have ego in there and competition. Then the people that are supposed to be served end up not getting served.
Yeah. What would the competition be?
Promotions, shifts. I mean, it's all sorts of things.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was doing chaplaincy work, the way that guys, that's a true statement. not a lot of people realize how much these guys compete for shifts. Some of them will compete for the graveyard shifts because those are the most exciting.
Well,
and
they're the greatest show on earth.
Yep, and then some of them will compete for the day shifts. Those are usually the older guys,
The rods, the retired on duty guys. Yep.
Yeah, and
we start our day out at 6 a.m. with coffee, and we have coffee till 10, and then we do a report.
And then they sit in their car, they watch a car go by, they go, "Oh man, he was speeding."
Yeah. Well, hope he doesn't hit anybody.
Whatever.
Hope he doesn't hit anybody. No, we're joking, of course.
Yeah, of course.
I know some day shifters that are outstanding seasoned dudes.
I had never, in all of my time working in the chaplaincy, I never met a officer that I would say had any kind of maliciousness or kind of negative attitude towards anything that was going on. Most of those guys, to a person, felt called to be in that position. But there was something that was happening where they didn't feel either connected to the community or they didn't feel, I don't know if I want to use the word appreciated, but perhaps that's the right word to use.
Maybe they felt neglected or forgotten.
Neglect might be a better term. They maybe felt neglected, not only by just the community, but the staff as well. And a lot of them, would begin to consider, it's like, well, gosh, why am I doing this? I could feel the same way and make $20,000 more a year in Spokane. So it seems to me like there would have to be a paradigm shift in the way that the culture is kind of constructed. And I'm not even sure how you would even approach that, really.
So remember, we did not get into this situation yesterday.
Right.
It was a progression over many years, and it is not something that can be solved in 2 years, 4 years. Norris has done an outstanding job getting the wages back and getting things in order inside the agency, and I applaud him for that. And so I always believe that our deputies have to have every resource they need to adequately and safely do their job.
Right.
I do the same thing in business. My guys, if they need a tool or a piece of equipment, I'm going to get that for them, because why would you enable your greatest asset, your greatest resource, which is your person, that mind that can perform all these duties, and then hamstring them by saying, well, you got all this great potential, but I'm not going to give you the tool you need to do this job well.
Right.
And I have seen this over the years to where, you'll spend thousands of dollars for something that makes the community feel good, community outreach, when that money could have come back for additional training, additional equipment that the deputies need. So I think that we have to always align our priorities. You, as a pastor of the church, have tools that you need in order to carry out your duties. And it's the same that everybody that does some kind of a service has the need, and that is to be well equipped.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a way in which the community can be more involved in kind of fulfilling a lot of those PR needs?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I absolutely believe that we should be tapping our local community, people that have the same buy-in. You have to share that vision and tell them why it's needed. Just going to the taxpayer all the time and saying, okay, now we need yet another increase, doesn't do it. Right. You get buy-in by the people that say, I want to personally have a stake in this. I want to be able to fund. I mean, we've been watching, I think, the canines. People have been donating ballistic vests for the dogs. Mm-hmm. And those are great things where the community can have a part of. We oftentimes, and some of it is self-preservation, you don't necessarily, as a law enforcement officer, become friends with everybody because, I don't know if I arrested you or your family member. You have to be somewhat a little bit reserved and cautious. But at the same time, the greatest law enforcement that we have is our own community cops, because they live amongst us. A federal guy that comes in here and he's enforcing the law, he doesn't have any family roots here. Yeah. He doesn't know the same community that we do. So we have these great assets in our local deputies and cops, and being able to be a part of helping them do their job better. Look, when you're dialing 911 and you need somebody there right now, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And people understand that. They understand the importance of having somebody pick up a phone on the other end and say, we're heading your way.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that I would definitely be working towards, is saying that messaging out. Also, I believe that we need to have a citizens posse. A citizens posse is absolutely constitutional, and it is allowable in Idaho state law. And all that means is that the sheriff is able to get a group of individuals to help join him in order to secure the county. And people automatically go, oh, we're going to start strapping, shields on guys and guns. And that's
all
not what it is.
All they need is a radio.
They are the backbone, the auxiliary. Cops are always going to do cop work. They're trained in it. They're certified in it. They understand how the Constitution works in its most intimate details. What's an illegal search and seizure, et cetera. But there's no reason why we can't have a posse, if you will. I know some people call me now, I'm an extremist and a militia guy, but you have a posse of vetted individuals that have gone through a basic background and training on how to come out and best support. I'm thinking even road engineers, radio men, electricians, carpenters. You use a pool of people that are there in order to help you overall secure the county from any man-made or natural event.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because people often talk about, working together as a community in a scenario where, you might actually end up having to start using some of these preps that you're doing. We have a lot of preppers in our community.
Yeah.
And we've tried a couple of different times to get tied in with other churches as far as radio communications and things of that nature. And, a lot of that stuff. And what we have found to be the problem is that there seems to be a disconnect in how they remain to communicate to get to a point where that becomes policy. Yeah. There's always a good idea generated, but there's never any kind of agency in which to kind of build upon that.
Yes.
And it seems to me like actually the sheriff's department would actually be a better course of action for that,
Yes.
because you have your elected official who is the sheriff of the county, and then you have already an emergency kind of dispatch kind of mentality, where if you could start kind of placing these things in the community, you could have a network that could secure the county.
Absolutely. I mean, you just stole my thunder, and I'm glad you did.
Oh, sorry, I didn't. Yeah.
And I'm so happy because you actually said what I was going to say, and that means that you have put thought into it and you get it, you understand. The sheriff is the uniter. He's the one that leads the county overall, leads the county towards righteousness, towards truth and justice.
Lawfulness.
And lawfulness, the rule of law. And he gets his people ready because he has that vision of saying, yeah, I understand we got all this day-to-day stuff that we got to do over here, because that's the majority of what we have to do. But I also had to continually make certain that this county is ready. And that is really part of the vision of what I have, is getting the community. I see at so many town halls, young men raising their hand, what can I do to help? And oftentimes the answers are very lacking.
Yeah.
When you could say, you know what? I have a lieutenant over here. Would you please, after this, go talk to him, put your name down. We're going to find something that you can do to help serve.
Yeah.
Because we, as less than 300 sworn across the entire county, cannot withstand an event all by ourselves.
Yeah.
We are there because we are that thin blue line from the order versus chaos. But the ultimate power, posse comitatus, is power of the county, power of the people. And people in this area are phenomenal with their skill sets, their determination, their love for this country, their love for the rule of law, that will jump in at a moment's notice to help their fellow man. And that's another thing I love about this community, is people love to help their fellow man.
Yeah, the only thing that is lacking is a solid leadership structure to organize them all. Yeah, that's the only thing that's lacking. You have an immense level of skill in this community, and you could talk about armaments, and you can talk about bullets, and you can talk about all that kind of stuff. But in reality, the most valuable asset that you're going to have taking into a situation where that's going to become relevant is the intelligence that you bring into it. And the intelligence that we have in this community in relation to self-sufficiency is off the charts.
Yes.
It's just incredible.
And you started this conversation talking about the people that are coming in here, the unique amounts of people.
And all of those people are like-minded in that.
And again, I understand that we have a separation. I'm not using a erroneous quote of separation of church and state, so follow me. But we do have a separation, right? The sheriff's office does not promote a religion. We know that we have all sorts of different faiths in our community and people that don't have a faith, and that's a faith in and of itself. But if you love liberty, if you love the Bill of Rights, if you are for the rule of law, all of us are united together. If you're a Marxist, then, we don't really have anything in common because you hate the Bill of Rights anyway. But ultimately, I want to be surrounded by people that love liberty, that love the rule of law, that are there because government's basic function, the very first function that it's supposed to do, is to secure your rights to life, liberty, and property. And
even if philosophically you're a Marxist.
Absolutely. And the sheriff's office will serve justice regardless of what your ideology is, your background. We see none of that. All we see is justice.
And I think that's important for Christians to hear too in our community, because I think that one of the things where Christians mess up is that we assume that unless the laws look similar to a theocracy, then they're not constitutional, which is just not accurate at all. If a person chooses to be a homosexual, we would view that as sin, obviously. But that person, if they choose to be homosexual, actually has the constitutional right to choose that lifestyle, and it's our job to convince them of their moral wrong. But they still have the right. And so, the sheriff's department, that's the thing that a lot of Christians don't understand. If you are a Christian going into being a sheriff, you adhere to an extremely high calling, because at some point you might find yourself in a position to where you have to defend a person's right to exist in spite of your own personal beliefs.
And that goes all the way back down to the founders.
Yeah.
I mean, they were so adamant about personal liberty that they talk about it over and over again in the Federalist Papers. That convincing group of papers written by Jay and Hamilton and Madison to convince New York to join with the Constitution.
Well, mostly Hamilton, right?
I know. So that's another podcast, right? Hamilton, interesting guy. But really, you go back and you learn what their intents were, what their intentions were, and we know that they were so opposed to an out of control, one-sided, a lopsided government, that they did everything within their ability to make certain that there were those separations, whether it was the judicial, the executive, and the legislative. And none of them were supposed to be dependent on the other, accountable to the other, but not beholden to the other, right? Because they knew that man's condition would eventually lead them back to unaccountability, because you can't say tyranny because that's a buzzword, but tyranny. And they also, when Hamilton discusses this in, I think it was again Federalist 85, he says we can rely on the fact that the states will continue to erect those barriers of separation because we're all sovereign, right?
Right.
And to be able to have true liberty, Madison even said, your personal property is not just tangible. It is also your mind.
Yeah.
And we forget this because we think that as Christians that somehow we have to start imposing everything that the Bible tells us on others, and that's not right.
Yeah, and the implication is even deeper than that, because it's not only your property, it's not only your mind, but it's your soul as well.
Yeah.
Because it's addressed from the point of view that you are created in the image of God.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty deep well that you get into when you start thinking about that philosophically. But yeah, it's an important job, and obviously you feel like there are some areas that that you can step into to make better. Some of those areas were the illegal immigration, the border not being secured, creating policies to help to do that. The human trafficking issue, networking with people to try and get ahead of that a little bit.
Yeah.
There's budgetary concerns, of
Yes.
course. What about the psychological and spiritual welfare of the officers?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked this question. You shared with me, and I had forgotten this if you had told me at some time or if I had heard it, that you were a chaplain.
Yes.
Number one, that is one of the coolest things that you could have ever told me. I was a recipient of a chaplain that to this day was the greatest pastor in my life. And people do not understand the importance of a chaplain. When I first started, I thought that chaplains were there to do death notifications, and do pastor type things. I had no clue that they were there to serve those of us in uniform. And Chaplain Thompson, John Thompson, unexpectedly passed away about 5 years ago. To answer your question, he would get into the car with me, and he would give me a chewing. He would do it in love, or he'd give me an encouragement, or he would listen, and he would speak truth, and he always prayed for me. And at times that I was going through a very, very difficult time in my life, this chaplain was the only person that I could hear what he was saying because he was there on my level.
Yeah.
So the culture inside the agency and some of those things you were just talking about spiritually, chaplains are the key to this, of making certain that the weariness of the job, that all the different strife and conflicts that those outside don't understand because of the sleep schedules, because of the traumatic things that you see day in and day out.
Yeah.
The chaplain is the most important resource. I don't even like to call it resource, the gift for men and women in the uniform. And I believe that we should have far more chaplains involved.
Yeah, that was a good program that Wolfinger had started. And that's when Wolfinger was the sheriff. That's who I served under, and who I took my oath under. And it was a great program. It lacked a lot of training, and there was an element of guys that kind of got involved with it.
Yeah,
that kind of messed it up for me, and I think probably for some other guys too. So, man, I think if something like that ever got resurrected, I would like to see there be some more stringent guidelines to accepting some guys in, even so far as like maybe even some kind of a psych test or something.
Look, I think that anytime you're a volunteer and you're in any area of where you come into contact with people, right? Absolutely. You should be going through background checks and polys and all of those similar things that the deputies have to go through, because that's just good practice overall.
Yeah.
And I know exactly what you're saying. I actually taught several times at a local police and fire chaplain academy for a friend that was with WSP. He's the chaplain over there. And I know exactly what you're talking about, but you also can't expect guys that are pastors, all of a sudden to be thrust into a traumatic scene where they see things that they were never prepared for, right? There's all these different aspects that, as a chaplain, you get exposed to that are different than Sunday morning or Wednesday night.
No, there's definitely some things that I can never forget.
Yeah. And smells too, I'm guessing.
Well, yeah. For some reason, I don't know why, but for some reason, the chaplain always ended up working really closely with the coroner.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I don't know why that is.
You'll never forget your first gunpowder and brain smell, right?
No. And the first suicide that I worked was something like that.
Yeah.
But the kind of what I was talking about, there was a component of that got involved with it that were looking to be. They were looking to be a police officer without having to go to the academy, or perhaps they washed out, or perhaps there's something in their past that would prevent them from being in law enforcement. I know that as a young man, I have a drug background, so I would probably be pretty challenged getting into law enforcement. But these guys, man, they would get in and they would have, they would buy tactical pants and they get, and all this other kind of stuff. And it's like,
The 5'11" boys.
yeah, they would completely miss the point as to what you were there for. And then you couple that with the lack of training. It was a beautiful program that kind of just got stepped on. And it could be really great. I've had some great conversations with guys in patrol cars at 3:00 in the morning. And really help them out with their families. And, there's a lot of work that could be done, but that's a good avenue to help with their psychological, spiritual needs. It's a rough job. And it's thankless. It's thankless in a lot of ways.
And I understand that there's comments. There are more high risk jobs statistically, iron workers and longshoremen and probably, and somebody's going to fact check me, but you understand kind of where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
But what they fail to understand is the rolling shift work and the constant exposure to evil and bad things, the lack of sleep, the lack of good nutrition and exercise, and it all takes a toll. I have a son that's a first responder. He works in the medical field, so maybe they're second responders. It's a debate, right? But
where does that put firemen?
No comment. I love fire. Fire are the boys. But my son, I can always tell because he works the graveyard shift, and sometimes he'll work 10, 11 days straight, and I know when he's starting to break because you can just see it. You can in the answers, and that's when I have to say, son, you have to sleep. You have to get perspective on this.
Yeah.
God gave us sleep for a reason. Sleep. But people don't understand, and the toll that it takes also on the family. And I don't care who you are, you don't ever enter into law enforcement and come out the same person.
Yeah.
You just don't.
No, you don't. You're definitely going to change. That's for sure. And then there's just physiological changes as well. You're exposed to all that, that adrenaline and all the things that go along with that.
The fun part of the job.
And then you gain weight because of it. And then if you're lacking in exercise, you start moving towards obesity. It can really drag you down. You get in law enforcement, and then you get to like age 45.
Yep.
And you got a really hard big gut, because you've had all that kind of what's the chemical? It's not, what is it? Cortisol.
Yeah.
Thank you. You've had all that cortisol pumping in your body, and it's changed you physiologically, and then that can lead to depression, and it's amazing to think about how many guys come out of law enforcement that they have psychological things because of the job, but most of those guys have learned to deal with that fairly well. It's usually their interpersonal relationships and themselves that they get depressed about.
The greatest cops that I know are those cops that have lives outside of a patrol car.
Yeah, for sure.
And to me there is no exception. I know a guy that was with Spokane, a cop's cop. To this day, if I could emulate one person, it would be this guy.
Right.
And he would come in and have discussions with us. We'd be in training, and he would talk about things like, marriage and law enforcement. And he would basically say, and I'm going to paraphrase, you don't have bad marriages because you're a cop. You have bad marriage because you're a bad individual, or, I'm going to use the expletive out there. And really, you have to get out of the shell of just hanging with cops. It's not healthy. Yes, there is a warrior mentality. It is needed. I do not have any kind of exception to that. It doesn't bother me, warrior culture, but
in small doses,
warrior poet again, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to go out and be amongst the people that don't understand. That's your calling.
But the dark humor, I know exactly what you're talking about. It has a draining effect on you emotionally.
And cops have to stay together, and they have to debrief and deflate together. Well, not deflate. What's the word I want?
Decompress.
Decompress. Thank you. Decompress together. you have to do that to be cohesive with your team that you're working on. And
Yeah.
they used to call that choir practice, And I can tell you stories from a mentor of mine who was in Broward County Sheriff's Office back in the 80s and 90s. He was on the second episode of Cops Ever. This is how far back he goes. And he tells me about the wild things that they did to decompress back then that today, would be an absolute don't. But there is an error that you have to do that, and you have to allow that decompression. But at the same time, you have to assimilate back into your community.
Yeah, it's absolutely essential. Yeah, so there's obviously, a lot of work to do. I think probably, I don't know if Ken has a final question, but, I would like to know what compelled you to wake up one day and think, I should run for sheriff?
Well, it's as simple as I was at the right place at the right time, and I saw something that I was so taken back by, and I continued to observe for a while and said, this cannot be, and if nobody else will, I will.
Can you elaborate?
I don't want to get into too much details because I don't want to disparage someone else, but in other words,
Gotcha.
I saw something that was lacking, and I think the role of the sheriff is so important that let me just put it this way. I felt it wasn't being, the office was not being executed in demeanor the way it should be, and therefore, if there's nobody else that I believe that is going to step up to be that solid leader,
Mm-hmm.
then somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. Leader not only for the sheriff's department, but for the
leader
community.
in the community.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Yeah.
let me
That's
clarify
essential.
that.
Do you have any other questions, Ken? I kind of dominated this whole
That's okay.
conversation. Sorry.
I'm the third wheel.
Well,
All right. I'll ask you a question.
All right.
Gibson, Martin, or Taylor?
it's a good question.
Oh, Martin.
Martin?
Yeah.
You're a Martin man?
Sorry.
I was hoping you'd say
Out of
that.
Martin D1. I could never afford the D35 or the D28s, and there's always a Martin. And behind that would be a Gibson.
Okay. Cool.
Because you can bang on them a lot harder. I used to play fiddle music, so you got to get those things.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
You used to play some bluegrass?
I did. I was actually the president of the junior hoedowners when I was in junior high.
Oh.
And I actually was signed to an independent label in my 20s and had a band and traveled and
Okay, so
Got a fellow musician.
yeah.
Next
so
podcast.
I play bass.
Uh-huh.
And Sean is our current worship leader is a bluegrass player from way back. We've actually played some bluegrass on stage here pretty recently. But yeah, we're wanting to get some stuff together, so we might have to give you a call and have you come down and jam with us.
And I'm really rusty because there was a point in my life where I was actually given the opportunity to go to Nashville for 6 months.
Uh-huh.
And the Lord at that time told me I had a brand new family that you just need to drop this, because I was touring on weekends and playing the circuits. And he just told me, it was like a vision. Stop. You need to put this away. Be a dad. Go take care of business.
Right.
I put those guitars underneath my bed, and I didn't play them for almost 15, 20 years.
Well, you know how you shake off the rust, right?
Well, my fingers are like,
Yeah, it'll come back. Give it 30 minutes. It'll come back.
I love bluegrass. I love country. I love all forms of music. So yeah.
Yeah.
But Gibsons, really, you want to start playing bluegrass, Gibsons are the bomb. If you're going to finger pick, which I'm not a good finger picker, Martins, but I love the sound of a Martin.
Yeah. They certainly have a softer, more round feel to them. Yeah, Gibson tends to have a little bit of a sharper feel.
What about you?
I'm a Taylor man myself.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Because you're a refined individual.
I don't know if I'd say that.
Yeah, he's very he approaches life as an engineer. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, everything is very mathematical.
It all makes sense.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Well, I was just looking at our scripture that I picked for today, and I didn't give it enough thought, but I think this does apply. Romans 13:1.
Yeah.
Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. So here in the primary, when this election comes up, you're going to be faced with a decision, Mr. and Mrs. Voter. And whichever way the election shakes out, whoever sits in that office as sheriff deserves your support and your prayers, really.
Absolutely.
I mean, they will be heading a department that is the front line against the evil that we see encroaching so much each and every day. And we've talked quite a bit about some of those forms here today. And if you're a believer, you've read the end of the book, you know it's going to get a lot worse.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's going to get any better before it gets a lot worse. And so you can play a big part in the security and the safety of your community, the health, spiritual, physical, and otherwise of your community by getting behind your local law enforcement officers, support them. If you see that patrol car in your neighborhood or going down the road, or he pulls up behind you in a coffee shop, a drive-through line, buy his coffee. Shake his hand. Ask his name. Find out who he is. Let him know you appreciate them. And support the sheriff, whoever it is, and do your due diligence. Research the candidates and vote with your conscience and your morals. And we thank you, Dan, for coming on.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
Bless
I sure
you,
appreciate
your
it.
wife, and your family.
It's
going to be a tough year, isn't it?
yeah.
It is, but I'm reminded
Campaign.
of the saying, duty is mine, results are God's. And that is what I rest assured in every single day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good way to keep the peace.
You have any final words for us, Dan?
I just appreciate this opportunity to finally be on the show, and I got the mug. So
yeah, the now world famous 3P coffee mug.
I guess ultimately what I want to relay to people is we have hope.
Yeah,
we have such hope because we have so many great resources, and we have a God that is constantly looking for those that want to be righteous. His eyes wander to and fro over the whole earth.
Yeah,
and we have difficult times in front of us, but that's okay. That's been the plight of all mankind. And we've been given the tools in order to keep this republic if we work hard enough for it. And that's exactly what we must do.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Amen.
Amen to that. Well, Dan, thank you so much, man, for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Donna, thank you so much for sitting around patiently. She's been sitting off mic for the last hour and a half, just patiently absorbing all of this. I'm sure you're going to get an earful when we
She
get
is
done
full
here.
of great advice and great feedback, so
Yeah.
I love it.
You'll be like, yeah, I didn't like your answer to that, bub.
And she would be right. If she tells me, she will be right.
For sure. But yeah, seriously, thank you, and we'll be praying for you, and to the sheriff now, and if you end up getting elected, I know that I speak for everyone in Athol Baptist Church when I say we appreciate you guys, and that we want to be as much of a help as we can possibly be, physically, spiritually, emotionally, whatever our resources are that we have that we can offer, that we want to better our community. It would be nice. And this maybe is going out to Sheriff Norris as well. It would be nice if we had more contact, if we had more communication. I know that there are a lot of well-meaning believers that would love to be able to do more. They just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So thank you for your insight. Thank you for everything that you brought to the table. And I'll be praying for you, and we'll see what happens, right?
Right. Thank you. God bless.
Amen. Well, that about does it for us today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you have a comment or a question or an idea for an episode, send us an email at 3p@atholbaptistchurch.org. Ken is waiting with bated breath to receive your email. If your idea gets used on the show, you could be the proud recipient of the now world-famous 3P coffee mug. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks again to Athol Baptist Church and its members for their generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening, and until next time, remember the Great Commission. Go into all the world, reach the lost with the gospel, and build disciples who could do the same. And with that, we are out.